Hi everyone, I'm Brooke Jamieson. I'm the experience lead at Place OS, and today I'll be talking to you about the persuasion equation, which is how to effectively communicate your results to people who don't want to listen to you. First up, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I am on, which is the Yagara and Turrbal people. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I would say everyone is joining from around Australia and New Zealand, if not the world. So I would say while you have some extra time during isolation, take some time to learn more about the land that you're currently living on and work out more about the communities. Also, this is a code of conduct. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to read this out. I know I was supposed to put it on the screen. Be nice, everyone. So into my talk. So I studied pure maths at uni, and then when I was doing maths, lots of my friends were doing their honours degrees, and I saw them spend so much time up late at night working so hard on their thesis, and then they would end up with a research paper that was really, really good, with really good work, and then as part of their thesis, they had to do a presentation about it, and everyone really did a bad job. I noticed more and more that people were not respecting the work that they'd put into the work that they had already done all year. They weren't respecting all of their late nights because when it got time to finally tell everyone in their community about what they'd done, they really couldn't present it. And what was left was something like this, which is a comic that I really like. This is by Tom Fishburne. He has a blog called Marketunist, which I really recommend. With anyone without a video feed, it says, here's a remarkable idea, rendered lifeless in 127 monochromatic slides that I'll read word for word for the next 90 minutes. I think everyone here has been in a meeting like that before. Normally I would ask you to raise your hands, but obviously you're all at home, so feel free to raise them in your own home, but I can't see them. And so how can we get around this? Now, so earlier in my career, I studied pure mathematics, and then I went to work in industries that were very tangentially related to tech, so like e-commerce and retail. And what happened was that my direct manager usually and my coworkers usually had no idea about what I was doing. They didn't have a background in maths. They didn't really know what was happening. They knew I was making the money. They were happy with that, but they really didn't know what I did day to day. And I used to get really frustrated that people didn't know how good of a job I was doing and that my results were so much better than what even I had done the year before, but without a way to communicate this to people, no one really understood. So then it left me with the idea of what's the point of working so hard to get great results if no one cares about them when you tell them? And I used to be really frustrated by this because I thought everyone should understand what I'm saying and everyone should know that this is good because I'm telling them it's good. But I didn't realize that I wasn't doing a good enough job at communicating this to them in a way that was persuasive for them and that they understood. And I think this is a common story for all of my friends who are in tech consistently. And I also would like to point out that it is definitely a learnable skill to become more persuasive and to become a more confident presenter. I used to be horrifically shy and just really, really bad at speaking, but I made a conscious effort to learn about how to do it better. And I think that that's a skill that stops a lot of people progressing within their careers, especially in tech, because it doesn't allow them to float up more to the surface if they can't tell anyone about what they've done. So let's stay tuned for this, but I'll know I've done a good job at the end of this session if you all leave with some points that you can use in your next meeting or in your next encounter with someone higher than you at your work, so you can help to explain what you're doing and explain why you're doing a great job. So one of the key things in a meeting is who are you talking to and what do they care about? I think a lot of people, I know I used to do this a lot, I would go into a meeting being like, I am going to tell everyone about this because this is what's important to me. But unless you think about who you're talking to, you're not going to be able to work out what to say in a way that's relevant to them. I've worked in marketing for a long time as well, and always at the core of marketing is who's your customer and what does your customer need from this? I think if you go into a meeting with that idea, then you can help tailor that. So if there's someone from security in the meeting, make sure you talk about the security implications of what you're talking about. If the CFO is there, make sure you're making some actual, researched ideas. about how this will affect finance, or have some insightful questions to ask them that might get them thinking about it. People want to know what's in it for them, but they also will always resonate with something if it looks like it's connected to what they're doing and it looks like from the outset that it will be important to them and really pique their interest. This is one of my favorite books, and this was a really big turning point in my career when I was saying earlier how I was just sort of floating about trying to just assume everyone would understand me all the time. This was a really good turning point for me because it showed me specifically how to persuade people and how to get people on side. And so it's not always that I wanted to persuade people one way or another. It's that I wanted to persuade them to listen to me and to trust me, which I think for a lot of young women in tech is something that happens again and again. And even so many people in tech, this is really relevant to. So I think you should read the book, but long story short, there's 6 points that are the principles of persuasion. So reciprocity is people are obliged to give something back to you when they've received something from you already. So in the book, they use an example of someone selling raffle tickets, and then they realize they can sell way more raffle tickets if they buy someone a can of Coke first, which could cost $2, and then they'll buy way more in raffle tickets after. So it's that you set the price of what you're giving them, but then you can get a lot in return. And I think if you start to look for this in a workplace, you'll see it more and more. Scarcity is always people want things that they can't have or that there's not many of. So things like diamonds are a really good example of this. But also when you see ads that say, oh, there's only 6 left, or when you get notifications like that in e-commerce, that also comes through to business, because if there's a limited time to act on something, or there's a limited number of people that will be able to set something up in a way that gets them results, that will be really powerful. And it not only encourages people to listen to what you're saying, it encourages them to act, and act quickly, which in business are 2 things that are really important. Authority is all about people always want to follow the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. So if you'd like someone to listen to you, how can you make yourself seem like an authority figure? Or how can you make the points that you're presenting look like they're coming from an authority figure? One way is to talk at a conference like I'm doing today, or people that have written books. You'll see as well, it comes up in their LinkedIn bio that they're an author, and suddenly you care more about what they're about to say, even if you've never read or heard of their book. Consistency is a really interesting one, and I think it's often misunderstood. But people want to be consistent with what they've already said and done. So I said that I was going to be presenting at this conference today, and even if I wanted to pull out because I was busy or something came up, I still would like to present because I already said that I was presenting. I already posted about it on social media, which means it's obviously very true. And then I had to follow through with that. So this in practice is really interesting because you can get people to, it's like the idea of saying little yeses along the way to get them more and more committed to something so that they're more compelled to follow through to the end product, which is really important if you're trying to get people to follow through in business. And liking is strange to me. So it's always people that like to say yes to those that they like. But some people interpret this as, I need to be exactly like someone else, which you don't. Like if someone likes golf, you don't have to start playing golf just for them to trust you. No, they have to like and respect you as a person, which is a different idea altogether. And consensus, which I prefer to call social proof. So this is the idea that when you walk past a restaurant, even if you've read online that it's really good, if you walk past and no one's there outside of COVID times, you would think it's not a good restaurant. So things like, how can you get a line out the door of your restaurant so that people will come? Can you say, oh, our company has 250,000 users worldwide, or we've had so many downloads, or these other companies that are authoritative are already using this product. So it's a good way of urging people towards a goal, but making sure they do it in a really timely manner as well. These are some other books I really like, and I really enjoy them because throughout my time in marketing, one of the things that always fascinated with me was the idea of stories. Because I saw more and more that people didn't really care about marketing. They just would sometimes get wrapped up in a really good story, or the story would stick with them and they wouldn't remember any of the actual points from marketing, but they would just remember the underlying tone. Joseph Campbell, A Hero with 1,000 Faces, is one of my favorite books. It's a difficult read, but I really recommend it. So it's about unpacking mythology and folklore from all different cultures and then working out the constant the way that stories are manufactured across cultures, and it's really, really interesting. And I have Principles by Ray Dalio there as well, because there's a whole segment in that devoted to Joseph Campbell's work that really applies this idea of the hero's journey, which is the underlying flow of stories, into business context. And I think it's a really good read. And then StoryBrand applies that again, but through marketing. When people say tell a story with your data, what they're saying is add context, because at the end of the day, people won't remember the actual data, but they'll always remember the little bits around it that add context, and they'll remember how they felt about it. This is how information's been translated and given across so many cultures for such a long time, and that's how people are ingrained to be ready to receive information. So the best thing you can do is to make sure that you're giving them information in a way that they'll understand. And doing it with a story is easier to present, but it's also so much easier to understand and, more importantly, remember for your audiences. So think about when you can weave something into a story, even if it's using story as a way to pass time, or to say before we did this and then we did this, to show contrast. There's so many facets of context you can add through narrative that will really improve how your overall presentation is received, but then how you specifically as a person are perceived within an organization over time. That will be really powerful for you. I really recommend reading all of these books, but if you're going to pick one, I would pick Principles by Ray Dalio, just because it is the most broad-ranging and probably the most useful for careers in tech and people that would be here. And another thing I really wanted to talk about is ego. As a young person coming into tech, ego was one of the things that frustrated me so much, because I couldn't work out why people who I didn't really understand had such big egos. And like when I was saying at the start that I used to be frustrated that I don't understand why people can't just understand me, and I don't understand why they can't just trust me, and I don't understand why it's not fair, and I would be frustrated that it's not fair. But life is not fair. And what you can do is work out how you will then integrate with that and how you'll fit in with everything that's going on. You will never escape egos in boardrooms, especially. These people probably got there because they had a big ego. So you're never going to get rid of that, and you're never going to convince them that their egos are logical just because humans are illogical. Investors are not rational investors. There's always a certain amount of cognitive bias that goes underneath that. But the best thing that you can do is understand that it is there and then work out a way to still win. That, I think, is the biggest takeaway from what I've said today. It's not fighting what people are doing or fighting who people are that you're talking to. It's about understanding, oh, this is who they are. How can I still find a way to win? And when I started using that mindset earlier in my career, it's something that really helped me to progress more, but it also helped me to be much happier in my work, because it's so much easier to turn it into a game then and think, how can I get through to these people? I'll try something else until I see something that works. And then that was what was really powerful for me moving forward. I think if there's anything you take away from the presentation today, it would be that. So then when that applies to ego, you're never going to be able to fight someone's ego, but think about how you can work with it. If someone's really obsessed, they always want to have the newest thing. They have the newest car, they have the newest phone, they've listened to Joe Rogan once, they would like everything that's new. What can you do about that? And then say, okay, cool, well, I've presented you and this is the result that is the newest one, or this uses the newest technology, or no one else is using this yet. Use scarcity and use the lack of social proof as a way to push them forward. Or if their ego, they're really worried about it and they're really worried about risk because they want to protect their ego, step through the risks and say, these are the risks at hand. These are the ones I've identified. And these specifically are the tactics that I've used to get around these. Show that you're mindful of that and show that you're still on their team, because the worst thing that can happen with people with big egos is that they think you're fighting them. The best thing that can happen is think, oh, Brooke's on my team in this. We can move through this together and find a way to win. And I think that's really important, especially for young people in tech looking to find their way into an industry and then find their path through where they're going. You'll have so much better luck with mentors and with your career trajectory if you can really harness this moving forward. And a key part of everything today as well is the difference between manipulation and persuasion. As someone with a background in data science, I have seen so many cases of data just being blatantly manipulated. And That's not what my presentation is about today. My presentation is about giving everyone the correct information in a way that they'll understand it and in a way that helps them to get the most value out of it. So I was trying to think today of some good frameworks or principles that would be a guiding point for this. And then I came across the American Psychological Associations. They have principles for psychologists to follow, sort of in their ethics code. And they are for psychologists, but they're really useful here. So the first one is beneficence and non-maleficence, which I can pronounce much better if I say do no harm. But essentially say, like, are you providing net value with your presentation? Are you giving everyone the best chance to succeed given the information that you've given them when they act on it? The next one is fidelity and responsibility. And this shows be aware of your responsibility to the people that you're presenting to. And also the people that you intend to present to and the people you don't intend to present to. So maybe if they share it across the organization or they show it to a different department, how will what you've put across, how will that change when it is passed on? Or what happens if you've designed something and you've presented that? What happens if they use it for an opposite reason? How can you then best equip them with the information to make a better judgment call about what is the best use of that and how can you become at peace with that long term? And principle C is integrity, which I always think about, don't misrepresent fact. It's about being honest and truthful and really down the line with how you're presenting things, which is especially important in data visualization. I could do a whole separate talk on that. But essentially, you just make sure you're telling the truth and be honest in how you're presenting it. Principle D is justice. So are you being fair? Which is also, have you built bias into your model, which is really important within data context. And I think it's another thing I could do an entire talk about, but just really be mindful about it from the outset so that you can then still find a way to tell a really good story. And principle E is respect people's rights and dignity, which in most tech contexts, a really big application of this is their security and privacy. I think as everyone in tech, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are leading by example on this front and making sure we're always standing up for the people that need to be stood up for. So make sure if there is points on this that could influence people's decisions, make sure you're really upfront with saying that and presenting that in a really truthful way that helps people make an educated decision. And overall, all of these are just, are you helping people to make an informed choice or are you manipulating them into think something that is maybe not true? So always think about that from the outset and it will protect you and really guide you towards a positive path in this process. And this is what I was talking about at the start. So if there's anything you take away, here's what you can do immediately to improve on your next presentation or the next time you have to talk about your work. Overall, just begin with the end in mind, which is from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But here it's really important. So when you start to plan your presentation, begin with the end in mind. So begin with, what do I want the people to leave the room with? Like, what is the few things I want people to remember after I've spoken to them? Do I want them to remember seeing 700 graphs? Or do I want them to think that there's a decision that needs to be made, it needs to be made quickly, and I've given them options to explore on this? That's true leadership, where you're really taking into account what people need from you and then how you can help guide their decision in the best way that you can with your experience. And then to do that, what's the story I need to tell really backs up that phrase. So really, at the end of the day, what do I need people to do? And then how can I guide them to that point? Who am I telling it to? Once again, is back when we saw the Guess Who game with the little people. Remember who's in the room and remember what they might need from you or what they'll be interested in, and make sure you're doing something that helps everyone in the room get what they need from you, because at the end of the day, they've given up their time, which could be worth any amount of money, to come and hear you talk. So you need to make sure that you've given them some really good value that's personally valuable to them. And am I showing as well as telling? I could do a whole separate presentation on how to structure slides or how to visually present your work, but I didn't want this to get off track. So I specifically didn't really talk about the visual aspect of presentation, because I think in a lot of times it's less important than the words you're saying and how you framed a conversation overall. But make sure if something's important, you've told them that it's important, but you're also showing them that's important. So whether that means flagging it or showing them how you got to that decision, that's really important as well. And then, am I giving them too much information or not enough? So when we came back to the start slide, when it said there was a cartoon, it said I've showed them 100 monochromatic slides, we can all agree that's too much information. But also on the flip side of that, if you go in with 2 slides and you just say, I'm right, I'm a genius, I am God's gift to data science, do this, no one will believe you because you haven't given them any reason to. So make sure you're hitting that sweet spot in the middle, which does come down to practice, but it also comes down to reading the room and understanding who you're talking to. And then also think about what are some next steps I can offer. So at the end, usually you're trying to get people to commit to an idea that's a really single thing. Like, I would like them to do X. I really want them to redesign their website, or I really want them to change this architecture because it will be faster for this reason. The best thing that can happen is they say yes to that. So make sure you're prepared for something to happen after that. So what if they say in the meeting, yes, we'd love to do that, great. And then they say, how do we get started? And you freeze because you haven't thought about what they'll actually do when they say yes. So I think a lot of inexperienced people fall down at this point because they haven't thought of how it will actually play out. So make sure you spend a few minutes beforehand just making sure if the best thing does happen, that you're ready for that to take place. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope it's been valuable to you. I think Rebecca has opened up questions in the Q&A, which she will read out in a moment, but this is my QR code to my LinkedIn profile. So I work at PlaceOS, which is a smart building and smart workplace company. We get all the technology within a building to essentially play nicely together with APIs so that we can add layers of user experience and automation on top of that. We work a lot with Microsoft M365 for a lot of our clients globally. So if you would like to learn more specifically about that, get in touch with me via my LinkedIn, or you can check our website, which is the other QR code on this page. To barrage you with more QR codes, this is our competition. I don't actually know what the prize is, but I've heard it's good. You can scan the QR code for this week and be in the draw. Screenshot or come back, this will be on a video, I think, at a time. And I would also like to thank our sponsors for this conference, which has been a lot to... There's been a lot going on behind the scenes that I've definitely seen. I would like to thank the organizers for putting this together outside of the sponsors because they've done a really good job. And so is there any questions?
Hello, yes, if anyone does have any questions, please pop them in the chat now. It looks like we've got a few popping in. But the first one, you did talk a little bit about data visualization. The question is, do you have any tips for tools to use for making data look good?
Yes, my number one tool would be the backspace button. I think too many people...
Sorry, you need to qualify that.
Too many people put too much on a screen, and I work a lot. So I work a lot with smart building data. So I present data to people that really are not data people. And the worst thing that you can do is you can put too much on a page, add too much that they don't understand, and people will just absolutely shut down and they just won't take in anything on the page. And I am always of the firm position that it's better people get 100% grasp of a small amount of information than they get a really small grasp of a lot of information. So when you are visualizing data, just always think, does everything on this need to be here? Is there something that I can do to show them this is the overall situation, and then I can qualify later with appendices or linking people later of like, this is what went into this. But making it simple for people to make their own decisions based on data that you have presented will be really useful to you long term.
Nice. If anyone else has any questions, this is probably your last chance to drop them in, because our other 2 comments are just feedback saying awesome session and amazing presentation from Daniela and Gia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you very much. Oh, new something popping in. I can never tell if it's a question. Oh, look, fantastic session from Nick.
Awesome.
Thank you, Nick. That's really nice. Well, if there are, looks like there are no more questions, so we can wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time, Brooke.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you later.
Bye.